Hello, everyone. Welcome to the World Series of Board Gaming's Designer Series here on the Dice Tower. My name is Chris George.
And I'm Brian Muller.
Or, as our friends like to call us, Chris Reckoning George.
And Dead Brian.
Even just you saying it. Oh, even just you saying it. I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait for you just to be Dead Brian. Yes, that is our bit that we are continuing from every single one of these other series. And of course, that ties in with our guest today. We are interviewing the esteemed John D. Clair. I didn't ask in the interview, Brian, but I think the D must stand for Dead Reckoning. I think that's how it came to be.
That's how it came to be for me. So
I'm excited about this one. I find with John D. Clair's designs, there's so much innovation and there's so much excitement around them. For me personally, anytime he comes out with a game, I'm like, yeah, that looks cool. I want to add it onto my shelves that are stuffed full. So I can't wait to talk to him. How about you, Brian?
I think he's just got so much stuff that has good things in it. Like, you want to play his games. You really do. Some games like Edge of Darkness. I don't know if you've ever played Edge of Darkness, but that game is like so different of an experience than any other game. Don't know what's going on at the beginning of the game, and it's a lot of stuff going on, but it's really, really neat. As you play it, you're like, oh, this is really good. So having played like all these games, I'm really interested to find out what his process of going over these game ideas and how that comes to be.
Absolutely. So let's turn it over to John D. Clair, who will be at the World Series of Board Gaming in 2023. If you are watching this video, there is still time to purchase your tickets to the event. Ticket sales close the 9th of September on 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. So if you're still on the fence, you have a chance. You can look a couple weeks in advance and say, I don't need to go into work those days. I can have myself one of the best board gaming events ever. Or you can go into work, either or. So for tickets for that, you can check out WSBGVegas.com. But now let's turn it over to John D. Clair. And we are joined now by esteemed designer, John D. Clair. Thank you so much for joining us, John. How are you doing today?
I am great today. Thanks for having me join.
Yeah. No, we're thrilled. We are thrilled to have you on the show as sort of a closing of this WSBG Designer Series for the year, or at least until after the event, because you're going to be at the event. People can come and play games with you, or perhaps against you in the tournament.
Indeed. I'm looking forward to it. I'll have a small pile of prototypes with me there. For when I'm not doing tournament-specific stuff, I'm looking to find people who want to try new stuff. Yeah.
When you're not crushing your competitors in your turn. What you're playing 7 Wonders, is that right?
7 Wonders is the main one that I'm doing. Yep.
Nice.
Okay,
yeah, the decision to I mean, all the options were great. You guys have a really good selection of games to pick from there. And it was a mess of them that is great choices. 7 Wonders is one of my all-time favorites, and I was like, you know what? I've won a tournament of 7 Wonders in the past.
There we go.
So, why not?
Who knows?
Competitors better brush up.
Yeah,
that's right.
We might see you with a ring, with one of those rings on your finger. That's cool. I'm excited about that. But I'm also excited to talk to you all about sort of design process and your design journey, because you've been in the industry for a long time now. I see your name popping up with just hit after hit. And I'd love to start these interviews with the question of, how did you get started? What made you want to start designing board games, for one, and how was that initial journey into the industry? If you want to just give us an insight as to how you started and how your journey has been up until now.
As many designers, it starts back when I was a kid. I was just sort of attracted to games from a really young age. I had a maze book called Monster Mazes by a guy named Dave Phillips that I just loved. It was like a gamified mazes.
Cool.
And I used to draw a lot of mazes as a kid. I probably tried my first dabble at board games when I was like 7 or something like that, trying to design a board game. It wasn't until I was 9 before I made a game that was actually like playably okay. But anyway, I was just interested in games as a kid. And then after I graduated college, I was like, you know what? I still have a lot of game ideas. I kind of want to see if I can get one published. Um, and the first game I ever published was Rumble Pie. Um, way back in I signed it in 2012. I guess it came out the next year.
Yeah, on BGG it says 2013.
Yeah,
I was scooping through your credits before the
yeah,
interview.
yep. So way back then, it's like a kid's family real time card battle game. Yeah, and then I just kept doing it. And card crafting was sort of my breakout, where that idea, even when I had that idea, I was like, this sounds like a really good idea.
Mm-hmm.
And Mystic Vale sort of made me a little bit more meant I had a game that people recognized in the industry. Yeah.
Right. And so in terms of that card crafting, I feel like you were the pioneer of that mechanic. And it's also something that I haven't seen many people other than yourself adopt. I feel like I know Canvas does it. But other than that, I can't think of many games that adopt that card crafting mechanic. How did that idea come about? And why do you think people haven't stolen it as much from you?
Borrowed.
Borrowed, stealing, borrowed. It's all the same,
Yeah.
you know.
Um,
The creative space.
uh, so the idea of there was like two questions in there.
Hmm.
The
Yeah.
idea originally came um, in a way that ideas often don't come. I was literally going through sort of like a mental exercise of trying to come up with something original,
Mm.
and not bad. It's easy to come up with original bad ideas, right? Those are pretty easy to come by. But original good ideas are really hard to come by. And I was trying to come up with something original. I have a process that I've now started calling kinetic design for ways to um, find design inspiration or solve design problems uh, via the physicality of components. So
Cool.
you look for ways that a component can be used that maybe isn't a traditional way to use it, that may solve a design problem or create an innovation. And sort of card crafting was the first instance of me doing that successfully. Um, I was thinking about different game components and ways in which they could be used that they'd never been used before. And when I landed on card sleeves, it occurred to me that I couldn't think of any games that used card sleeves as a necessary component for the gameplay.
Right.
And then from there was, what do I do with that idea, right? How do you use card sleeves in a way that does matter for the game? Um, and that's sort of where the inspiration came from. Um, why hasn't it been borrowed by other designers? I think it has. There's been a number. There was Alexander Pfister did a game called Cloud. Um, now I can't remember the name. Cloud something, and he used he used it in an interesting way, like
Okay. Cool.
overlays. The first one I ever saw actually was from Simon, a game called Hate, um, and they used it in a way that I was thinking about using, but hadn't at the time yet, which is from game session to game session, you carry over certain changes to the cards via the
Right.
card sleeve. So they don't change mid game, but they change in between games.
As sort of that campaign legacy style element
Right.
existing.
I've I've had the desire to make a sort of expandable or collectible card game with card crafting for a long time, where you not only build your deck, but you also get to sort of build the cards in the deck. There was just a game up on Kickstarter that was doing that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, a small game. Now I can't remember the name. Yeah, anyway, it was a small game on Kickstarter that I saw doing kind of that idea. So there's this been done. There hasn't, other than Canvas, there hasn't been a really a breakout hit.
Hmm.
And Canvas does it in a very clever way artistically, in that the theme itself um, is about making weird and wacko art. So one of the challenges of card crafting games, right,
Right.
is how do you make the art not look kind of silly and ridiculous or just bad, right?
Right.
Because when you overlay cards, um, you either need to have a very formulaic pieces of art so they layer, and you may even need to force people to say, like, you have to sleeve this at the front of the card and this at the back because this is a foreground and this is a background, right?
Right.
And that's very restrictive if you want to say, hey, you create your card however you want, mix and match powers, right? So that's actually almost a barrier is the art. And now Canvas did it in a really clever way where they just said, hey, the game is about making really weirdo art, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They just sort of dodged the problem completely. Um, Anyway, I think another barrier is it's really annoying to prototype, like really annoying to prototype.
Right.
Now I've got a formula now, and I can crank out them pretty quick. I get a bunch of like blank, transparent card size things from AEG, um, and I can just put stickers on them. But like when I was first making it, I'd have to, get these sheets of plastic about this big. I'd have to like pen in card lines and then cut them. And cutting on a transparent sheet is really hard, right? You like
Right.
hold it up to the light and like try to cut along the line.
Yeah.
I think that's a big barrier to it. Anyway,
Well,
I won't ramble on too much about card crafting.
hey, ramble away. This is what this interview series is all about. I think our audience is interesting, and especially you as like the preeminent, I'd say the preeminent card crafter designer
Sure.
out there, right? Like I feel like your knowledge base is naturally going to be so much more expansive than somebody who just tried it as a one off. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah, I like to say, like, I didn't invent card sleeves, and I didn't invent um, the idea of plastic, of transparent cards. Both of those existed. I was just the first person, as far as I'm aware, to put them together
right,
into a game mechanism. Yeah,
cool.
That's a that's a lot of effort to do that, and I imagine it takes a lot of persistence to stick through doing all that effort for something that you're maybe guessing is going to be good. How important do you think persistence plays as a role in game design?
it's hard to quantify. It's extremely important. Uh, Potentially the most important early if you're a new designer. Um, uh, there's a lot of speed bumps and design problems that you learn as a designer who's done it for a long time to sort of get around and avoid.
Right.
So a lot of my designs now skip a bunch of the problems that they would have run into early on in my design career, right? And
Yeah.
they get to like a good playable game a lot faster. But even then, uh, I get to a good playable game, and then I try for months to make it into a great game, and it just stays as like a good game, and I'm like, is this even worth bothering with, right? Um, uh, but early on, yeah, absolutely. Especially if you've got something really interesting and different, and then trying to make that into a good game is tough, and it takes a lot of persistence, right? One, you have to have the confidence that your idea is good. Um, And, I like to say you can be a little too stubborn about thinking your ideas are good, because sometimes your ideas aren't that good. Um, uh, I've been down that road before. I'm like, this sounds like a really cool game idea, and then I try for a while, and it just never turns. Like I was like, never turns into it. It's playable. It's okay. It's
Yeah.
fun-ish, right?
But it's always hard to kill your darlings too, right? That you've
That's a
spent so much energy into it.
it's a mindset, right? Of
Yeah.
that you get into as when you design a lot of games. I am not short on game ideas. I have more game ideas than I have time to work on. So when a game idea I thought sounded cool just isn't working, it's not hard for me to just move on to the next one, right?
Right.
Um, but back to the persistence, when you know there's an idea there, like card crafting, right? I went through quite a few game ideas and trashed a number on the way before I got to a game that I was like, oh, this is actually good. But I knew that
For
core
Mystic
idea.
Vale specifically.
Actually, it was Edge of Darkness was the first card crafting game that I got to that I was like, oh, this is good, and I should pitch this to publishers.
Cool.
But I knew the idea of card crafting was good, even if at the time I wasn't as good of a designer as I am now, and it took me a long time to get that good idea to a good game. Right.
Right.
Yeah. How did that? I played. I really enjoy Edge of Darkness, but it's more deeper. It's much deeper than Mystic Vale. How did that pitch process work when you were pitching that? Because Mystic Vale ended up coming out first, right?
Mystic Vale did come out first. It's a much simpler, more straightforward game. So I pitched Edge of Darkness, and honestly, I could go down a rabbit hole on thoughts on Edge of Darkness as sort of a post-mortem now that we're 5 years out from when it was published.
Let's
Because
go down the rabbit hole.
yeah, that's right. There's some really cool ideas in that game. That game innovates in like multiple ways, not just card crafting. And one of the things I've learned is you have to be careful with the game design to do too much new stuff all at once. Um, so one of the advantages Mystic Vale has, really the only innovation in the game, was the card crafting. The way you build the deck, I guess, was like for a lot of people was new, but it wasn't. It wasn't my idea. Uh, a game called Flip City had done it before. It's kind of blackjack, right? Like keep drawing until you want to stop where you bust,
Right.
right? Um, but a lot of people hadn't played a deck builder like that before, I guess. But the real innovation, it was card crafting, and that was more or less it. But with Edge of Darkness, there's like 3 different innovations. The cards are double sided. On the back side of the cards that you use to fight the monsters, right? The way you the action economy with the workers. It was like a deck building game where the cost of every card was free, but like you had to use worker management to use your cards effectively. Um, the way the threats attacked was the tower, which I hesitate to call that innovative. It was just a way to randomize 3 things, but it felt innovative. It was different, right?
Yeah. You still don't see a lot of cube tower dropping stuff.
I love cube towers. I've got 2 games with cube towers now, so
the way
no secret I like cube towers.
Yeah.
So when I originally pitched Edge of Darkness, it was a much smaller game in size. The cards were all like 7 Wonder size, not Taro size, and they would go on small boards, not these big boards. The workers were just like little tiny meeples, not like miniatures. And one of the game mechanisms that I later added that fixed a problem, but actually introduced problems that I came to recognize later, was the way you draft your hand. So it used to be everyone would just random draw off the top of a face down deck, and they'd randomly draw their hand. And later it became like you would draft your hand out of a market, and it solved the randomness factor of just right, because in Edge of Darkness some cards just get way better than others, right?
Yeah.
They just do, right? And it solved the problem of just randomly blind drawing into a better hand than somebody else. But it slowed the game down a lot, right? And looking back, I wouldn't approach trying to solve that way anymore. I would take a different route with that. Anyway, so lots about Edge of Darkness. When I pitched it, it was a simpler, faster game than what it ended up being, which part of that was I think we talked ourselves into Edge of Darkness being a big Kickstarter game,
right,
with miniatures and all, because at the time we were looking at CMON games and all these games that were doing really big on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And the core of that game at its best, I think, was like a medium deck building worker placement experience. Anyway, so I pitched Edge of Darkness originally to AEG, and then they decided. And then they were like, we really like this card crafting thing. We want to make more card crafting games. So if you have any more ideas, let us know. And we think, we'd like to follow up Edge of Darkness with a lighter game that's just about card crafting. It doesn't have all this other stuff going on. And it was shortly thereafter I had the idea for Mystic Vale, and I pitched that to them, and they're like, oh, yeah, okay, Edge of Darkness isn't far enough along the development process at this point. We're just going to do Mystic Vale first.
Cool.
No.
I think that's always so fascinating in terms of the development time that happens, right? You talked about like, okay, I've got a game, it's not quite working, I'm going to set it aside, but I imagine there are some that you've returned to and have cracked those solutions. Do you often have multiple games going at the same time in which you're working on, or do you like to just pursue one sort of streamline one?
Back in the day, it used to be one at a time.
Yeah.
No, I think my current count is like 16 games that I am either actively working on, will work on soon, or have worked on recently.
You're going to give Reiner Knizia a run for his money.
That includes like expansions, right? Like that's a space-based expansion in there, a Kibitos expansion,
right? A
Dead Reckoning expansion, a second edition for one of my games that I won't mention. Yeah, and then a bunch. Some of those are games that are I've already signed, like I've signed with a publisher to design for them for an IP or something, and some of them are games that I'm just making because I've had the idea and I had some time to put on it, right?
Yeah.
I've now reached a point where I'm like, I can't not adding any more games until like when a game leaves what I'm working on, then I'll start
Right.
working on the new idea. Which
Yeah.
of course isn't true because just a few weeks ago I started on a new game. But I was like, this is an idea. I want to make it. Um,
We'll see that one in 2030. Well, we're jumping around a little bit. You mentioned IPs. I know you've got one coming out for The Last Kingdom.
mhm.
That's been announced on it's on BGG. What would you say? We've talked to a few designers about this. What do you say the difference of designing for yourself versus designing for an IP? If you want to talk about the differences and the restrictions, and or what ways it opens you up creatively, if you find there's a difference of feel in that design process.
Yeah, there's a difference of goal for sure.
Mm,
When so not many of my games start with theme. I usually I mentioned kinetic design. I'm often
right.
inspired by a game system. Sometimes it's a physical component, um, and sometimes it's a non-physical game mechanism, right? But I'm also often inspired that, and then I search for a game around it that would make sense, and then I search for a theme that would make sense with that game. That is often the route. It's not always the route. Um, and obviously, when you start with an IP, it's
You've got the theme.
it's obviously theme first, right? So you have to look for game mechanisms that make most sense with that theme. Um, when I'm making a game on my own, uh, innovation is kind of really crucial to me. If the game's not doing something that gives people a reason to play it other than and not one of the many good games that already exist, um, I'll just work on a different idea, right?
Right.
But an IP is a reason for people to play a game other than the many reasons exist. So the game systems within that game don't need to be super innovative, right?
Right.
They just need to be good and do justice to the theme.
Yeah, and capture
Um,
the feeling.
right. So like whenever I make a game, there has to be a reason why people should play it other than and play it rather than just playing one of the half a billion other great games, right? Um, uh, so yeah, I try to innovate, but with an IP, if I have a really good innovative idea for the game system that fits that IP, great, right? I'm not against that, but it doesn't need to be. So that's actually really probably the biggest difference for me
Mm,
is the search for something really different isn't as crucial in the gameplay.
mm,
It's more important that the gameplay does justice to the theme um, because the theme itself is a reason for people to want to play
right.
it. Right?
And then what are the mechanics and how do you feel you capture that in the Last Kingdom one? Is it
Yeah,
out yet? I'm not sure. I know it said
they were
2023.
selling it at Gen Con.
Yeah,
I don't know if that means it's on retail shelves yet. Maybe.
right.
Um,
On its
yeah,
way, we'll
yeah,
probably say.
imminently,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
not already. Um, yeah. So the Last Kingdom. So I hadn't actually seen the show or read the books um, prior to Gamelin reaching out to me. I was like, it was 2020, and I had time, and and I was like, oh, yeah, you know what? I think I'll try to take on this challenge. So I watched the show. Um, it was good. I liked the show.
Mhm.
We could talk about the show. I have some quibbles with it, but in general, I liked it. Uh, um, and then I went on making the game. Right. So what I wanted to capture, I think the most important thing to capture about the show for that game was the characters um, and the politics and incentives that players are dealing with as those characters around the battles, right?
Mm,
And then obviously there must be fighting, right?
right.
There have to be battles, right?
It's all political intrigue.
Yeah. So I mean, we talked about a few ideas. We're like, we could do a tactical battle game, right?
Yeah.
We could do, but what they wanted was like a dudes on a map game, and then um, I thought a politics element was super important since characters in that show are switching sides often.
Mhm.
The main character himself is literally like by parents and by adopted parents on both sides, right?
Right.
Of the conflict, right? So I wanted the game to sort of capture that. Um, So from there, I looked for games that, were really good area control politics games for inspiration and to inform the design. Um, uh, and the main game that inspired and informed the design of Last Kingdom was The King is Dead, um, which is a much simpler and beautifully elegant little game, right? But also not very thematic, right? So I was like, I love that game system. Um, uh, how do I expand it? Um, a, use some of the great ideas in that, right, as inspiration for a game that
Yeah.
fits the Last Kingdom world, while hitting all the characters and the story and the setting. And then the other inspiration for it was Blood Rage, which is a game I absolutely adore. For sort of the build progress of
Mm,
a two-step. In that game, it's a three-step, but in Last Kingdom, it's a two-step draft.
right.
And that feeling of the first round mattering and the second round really mattering, right?
Yeah.
Cool. And so that was with Gameland Games, but a lot of your titles are signed by AEG, right? I'd say the majority of your titles,
Almost all of them at
all
this point.
almost all of them, right? I was looking through and I was like, yeah, I feel like AEG, AEG. How did you get involved with AEG, and how has that relationship been? Because clearly it's a good relationship because you keep on working together.
Yeah, they're great. I mean, John Zinser, the owner of the company, I consider him a good friend now.
Hmm.
So I got my relationship with them originally began when I was pitching Edge of Darkness. I pitched it to a number of publishers. Almost everyone I showed it to was either interested or thought it was really cool, but said it was too big of a project. Like they don't know
Right.
how to do the they weren't willing to go down the very difficult road of figuring out how to do plastic cards.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and AEG was one of 3 publishers that were interested in it, and they made what I considered the best offer, and I went with them. And then, like I said, then they were like, "We want to work on more card crafting games, and we want to work with you more." So I just sort of developed a relationship with them. I pitched the Mystic Vale, and then from there we went. John Zinser wanted me to come work for him. We ended up with a deal that wasn't exactly the same as that, but meant I was more or less exclusively designing for them.
Right.
Um, that deal, no, that deal, we are now beyond that, and I'm pitching to other publishers as well, but not in any way is that because I don't want to work with AEG. They're great. I've got like 6 projects with them still. Um, 6 of those 16 are AEG related.
Nice.
Um, so yeah, I intend to continue working with them. They're great. They do good stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. Did you feel like working with AEG and being kind of in that sort of like exclusive, almost like on the staff, sort of, right, in terms of that
Yep.
exclusivity in terms of design? How did that sort of push your own development process as a designer, and what was their development process like? Because I know, talking to a lot of designers, you come in with an idea and then it's shaped and helped by the publishing team or the development team
hmm
behind it. I wonder if you can reflect on that a little bit.
So AEG has gone through some interesting changes since I've worked with them. Right when I first signed Edge of Darkness, like half their business was L5R, Legend of the Five Rings,
Right.
right? And since then, they've sold Legend of the Five Rings, and they've become just a board game company, right? They
Yeah.
don't have any more.
With a huge sort of expansive catalog too.
Yeah, most of their history, they were known for making. Most of their history, I guess, up until about 10 years ago, 7 years ago, they were known for making collectible card games, right?
Right.
So that was a big change at the company. And they've gone through some other changes. When I pitched to them originally, they had an office out in Ontario, California. Now they're just purely a virtual company. Um, uh, Development wise, um, every game usually goes with a developer
Right.
at the company, and we from there they help. I will work with them to take the game to the finish line.
Right.
Um, uh,
And you like being involved in that hands-on process
I
for sure.
I really do.
Yeah.
I've had to become a little bit more selective about which games I'm as hands-on all the way through.
Hmm.
Um, some games I don't feel it's as necessary, um, And when I'm working on this many games, I just can't be as closely in touch with every one of them all the way to
For
the finish
sure.
line.
Yeah.
Um, so I have to be a little bit more selective about which ones I think it's more important, or I'm just more interested in working closely on all the way to the finish line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
I don't know if I fully answered your question there, but I'll
Oh
leave
yeah.
it.
Hey, we're just hanging out. We're just hanging
Yeah.
out, talking about board games, talking about the industry, and talking about all the John D. Clair titles that are
Yeah.
friggin' great. I love that idea of innovation, right? Because
Yeah.
I feel like I'm always looking for a unique game. I feel like as gamers, we have generally large shelves, and it takes a lot to get a new game onto that shelf, right? And having a unique mechanic coming about is for sure a reason for that. And I love just how widely varied I feel like your experimentation with mechanics comes. One game that I'm so desperate and excited to try because I've heard nothing but great things is Rolling Heights, and I can imagine that that is a direct result of your kinetic design philosophy. Just
Yeah, that game has two aspects of kinetic design in it.
yeah,
Yeah. The rolling of the meeples was an idea I've had for a long time. I'm a bits fiddler, so when I'm playing with games, I'm just kind of fiddling with stuff.
yeah,
So anytime I'm playing a worker placement game where I've got meeples, I'm just kind of like rolling them all game long. I'm like, this is definitely a game here, right? It's not going to be that different than dice, but it's meaningfully different. And actually, as I worked on the game, became evident the ways in which it's actually meaningfully different than rolling dice.
yeah,
Um, so I'd always sort of had that idea, and then a good friend of mine, a local designer here in LA, he started working on a meeple rolling game, and I was like, oh, that's like I've been I love this. I've been thinking about this idea for a long time. So that put it sort of like back top and back like front and center for me.
yeah,
Right around like, and only a couple months before I had the idea, which was used in Cubitos for pushing your luck with mostly blank dice,
hmm
right? Where you roll all of your dice and only one or two sides on most dice actually have anything, but you roll a lot all at once, right? And whatever one's hit, you set aside, and then you can push your luck. And as long as you hit something, you don't bust, right? And I was like, that's a really cool push your luck system for rolling lots of stuff. People
yeah.
like rolling lots of stuff. I like
People
rolling lots
do. I do as
of stuff, right?
well.
And then I was like, wait a second, meeple rolling. Maybe that works with meeple rolling. And then the second aspect of it was I just had like, I don't know why I had a bunch. Oh, that's right. It was the exact same thing. So when I was making um, a prototype using sort of the Cubitos system, um, I was using 10 millimeter cubes, and I would just stick like a little sticker on one side of them for the effect, right? And I just had like a pile of like 14 of these cubes on my desk with like one sticker on them. And I don't remember what I was doing, but I was fiddling with the cubes and just stacking them, and building little like skyscrapers with them. And I was like, huh, that's actually kind of cool, right? Maybe that should be a game system. And then like both of those ideas were right around the same time. I was like, maybe the game should be meeples rolling in order to build skyscrapers. Um, yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's where a lot of inspiration comes from me, just like fiddling with bits and thinking about how they can be used
Yeah.
physically. Yeah.
That's pretty crazy.
Sure. Brian loves what was the one that you find is Teach You, an innovation on
Yeah,
Teach You?
the Custom Heroes game is like a great layer on top of Teach You. We talked quite a bit about how there was a Teach You is a good 4-player game and 6-player game maybe, but it's always there's been a lot of people who've tried to make it for odd player counts and just haven't really
Mm.
really fully got it. But Custom Heroes, not just is it a good game for odd number of players, but it's just a really fun game all around that adds quite a bit of interesting mechanics to the
Uh,
teaching thing.
yeah, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on Cubitos, Custom Heroes. Uh, I think it was a really good idea that we did an okay job with. Um, yeah, which is I think the art clashed for a number of people with the style
Yeah,
of game that it was. Some people the art was great for, and a lot of people the art was just not the type of game they thought they were sitting down to play,
Right.
right? Um, and then I think we overcomplicated some of the aspects of the scoring and the way and the resource management, but all of that was really cool, right? The core
yeah,
of it was good. Um, so maybe I have another game along those lines that
Who
I'm not
knows? Who
sure I'm
knows?
allowed to talk about.
I assume that you probably don't. You probably don't, but if enough people get interested in the comments down below, then maybe you could start working on one. You know what I
That's
mean?
right.
Maybe
Yeah,
the community could push that forward,
that's right.
and certainly isn't something that you may or may not have in the can, right?
That's right.
So what
I'm
was it? What
definitely.
was the art
Okay, go ahead.
process like for the game? Because I when I first sat down, I said this art isn't necessarily for me, but it is a great game, a really really great game.
Yep.
How did that art process work? Was that through the developer? Or?
Yeah, that was mostly all AEG's management and decision on it. Uh, and it didn't sound like a bad idea to me. Uh, and again, we could debate whether it was a bad idea in the end or not. I don't think it served the game better than a different theme could have, though.
Hmm.
And so we were talking about themes for that game. My original theme and name for that game was called Entropy, and every card was a planet. Um, and as you added things, it would add like comets and like space debris onto the card. And it was like as the game progresses, your little galaxy gets just more and more chaotic. But that wasn't necessarily the theme that we were going to go with, right? It was just the prototype theme.
Placeholder,
Uh,
yeah,
yeah,
or maybe go forward with it.
which maybe that would have been a better theme, right? Who knows? Um, just along the playtest process, someone suggested, hey, this should be about heroes, and every card is a character, and when you sleeve something on it, like it's an item that they're holding, and the
Right.
characters get weirder and goofier.
Is
And we were like, yeah,
that's
that sounds.
the foam finger is.
Yeah. And I actually think that was a good idea. I don't know if the anime style was the right for the game. The idea of people holding things and it being silly, because the game has a silly feel to it
Hmm.
sometimes, right? It's a thinky game, right? Decisions are not obvious; they're tricky, um, but it has a silly feel to it, right? When you're,
Yeah.
hey, this 10 is now two 18s, right? And everyone's like, what? And then someone else is like, oh yeah, well I have a card that's two 20s, right? Um,
It's great. It really is great.
so yeah, I mean that theme was landed on in that conversation. Everybody really liked it, and it kind of went from there. Um, you can always look back and say, we should have done it differently after the fact, right?
Right. There's always ways to tweak and change. I feel like do you feel like there are little things about every game that you've produced? I feel like that it
I'm
must be
always
for every
trying.
designer.
I'm always trying to be really honest about the stuff I've done in the past and the mistakes and things to learn from.
Right.
Uh, there's almost always something about a design that I look back on and say, I wish I'd done it differently, right?
Hmm.
I mean, even some of my latest games, right? Like Dead Reckoning, which I've described in the past as my best game design, and it might not be anymore. But that I'm not allowed to talk about that one. But I think Dead Reckoning is super good on a lot of levels, and I look back on it and I'm like, there's a handful of like little things I wish I'd changed, right?
Hmm.
There's just some little rules that could have been more streamlined. There's a few ways, given the chance to redesign, I'd probably make 7% changes, right? Um, but that's true of just about every game, right?
Right.
Even the
Yeah.
ones that I look back on, I'm like, that's a really good game. I'm really proud of that design. But that's the process. I'm trying to find ways to improve and learn
And
from
get
my
better and
own
You're
things.
doing a great job. You have
yeah.
a lot of really good games. One of the games that I really love is a game we played out at World Series of Board Gaming. I got to play with Tom Bassel, also plays Cosmic Encounter with him. But forget that game. Ready, Set, Bet, man. That game is so much fun. So much fun. Tell us a little bit about that one.
Oh man, Ready Set Bet is a weird game. So I had long had the idea, and I feel like I got jumped by I'm working on so much stuff. I got jumped by some other designs, like Challengers, right? Like Challengers is essentially the game I wanted to design 5 years ago, right? If the high level description of it,
Right.
shaking all over the place. I'd had the idea for making a tournament in a box game before auto battlers were like a thing, like
Right.
at all, right? Before team fight tactics, or any of that stuff. I was like, it'd be really cool if you had a game where the game was about building a little deck that then you did little mini game battles against other people, and then modified your deck in between games. And I was like, I want to work on that at some point, and then I just hadn't gotten to it. And then it became a really popular genre. Uh, uh, but the idea of a 0-player game, um, uh, which was sort of at the core of that. So that idea was like you make decisions around how to build your deck, but then when your deck plays, it just plays itself, right? And that's sort of a 0-player game, right? It's two decks playing against each other, but there's no players. And I liked the idea of that. I sort of see Camel Up as the most closest game to Ready Set Bet, and Camel Up is essentially a 0-player race going on, right? The camels are just racing, and we're just trying to make strategic decisions around how to make money off the race, right? So I'd had that idea, and then I was talking with Alex Haig from CMYK Games, and we were bouncing ideas around 0-player games. We ended up on a bit of a different path, and then but a similar idea, good sort of brainstorming around 0-player games, and then it's back to fiddling again. A really stupid thing I used to do as a kid all the time, because I just like dice odds. They're just kind of fun. I would have 2d6s and I would just roll them repeatedly and mark how many I'd rolled of each different number, and then just see which number gets rolled 11 times first, right? And it's remarkably not 7 a lot of the times, right? It's sometimes it's 5, right? Every now and then it's 10, right? And you're just like, wow, that seems crazy. And obviously, the longer you roll, the eventually 7 ends up winning, right? But if you have the right length of race, the unpredictability of small sample sizes makes for really interesting results potentially.
Right.
And then so with those sort of 0-player ideas in my brain, I found an old sheet of paper of those me just writing notes of dice rolls, and I was like, huh, maybe that could be the 0-player game. It's literally just dice rolling, and you just track how many rolls, which number's been rolled the most, and that's the game, and then you just bet on that. And then of course I was like, well, how do I turn that into an interesting decision space, right? Like Camel Up does it in turn-based, and on your turn you can either progress the race forward and get a small payout, or you can make a bet. And it occurred to me, well, maybe it should be real time. Maybe the race would be really exciting if it's just going in the background, and you just have to decide what you think is likely to happen at any point during the race, right?
Yeah. I think that's why so many people just enjoy being the caller as well. I know. I
really enjoy it.
Yeah, you did a big game at Dice Tower West, wasn't it?
I did.
Yeah. Just calling it out where everybody can be throwing.
I didn't do the calling that game. They didn't ask me to do it. I would have done it. But I taught the game to 80 people at once and helped facilitate the game.
From 0 to 80. I assume that idea of that rolling the dice and the probabilities, and that probably informed Space Base as well. Yes.
Yeah. So the inspiration for Space Base came from a different place than a lot of inspiration. That's not entirely true. I've had a few games inspired this way, like Ecos. So Space Base was inspired by almost really liking Machikoro. And it's no knock on Machikoro. Machikoro is a great game and lighter than Space Base, right? Like, my parents still don't understand Space Base, but they can play Machikoro, right?
Yeah.
But Machikoro always frustrated me playing it, because I really liked a lot of it. And one night after playing it, I was just lying in bed thinking of what would I do? What would I change, right? How would I make it a game that I would like? And then I was like, wait a second, maybe there's just a game there that I should make. And that's where Space Base sort of came from.
Well, that's funny. I did also want to go. We're running a little short on time, so I don't want to keep you too long. But I did want to go back on the idea of improving upon your games, and what amount of expansion space, I guess, do you like to try to innovate on previous things, or how do you go about producing expansions? Because I know AEG's latest Kickstarter, which was a fantastic deal, was like a big 4-pack of expansions. And I know, I think Space Base was in there. I think Cubitos was in there.
Yeah.
But
Tiny
there were
Towns
Tiny
and
Towns and War
War
Chest.
Chest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those were the 4. But in terms of that, like increasing little expansions upon an existing system, what makes you want to go back? Other than the publisher saying, "Hey, we'd like an expansion. Your game is popular," and what makes you interested in designing in that space and adding to that space, and how do you balance that with keeping the core element of the game kind of sound?
Yeah, I mean some games are more readily expansionable
Hmm.
than others. A lot of times in the design process, I set aside good ideas because I don't want to make the game bigger than
Right.
a certain sort of target complexity. But I like those ideas. I liked the version of the game with them in there.
Yeah.
It just made the game more complicated than I want it to be as a base game. So then those become expansion ideas. Um, if those ideas exist, I'm kind of like, I want to make an expansion for this game, right?
Right.
Um, and if they don't, then if I haven't landed on those ideas and I think the core game was pretty good, then and if the publisher then comes and says, "Hey, we want an expansion for it," then it's like, okay, all right, let's think about what ways we could introduce a new path to victory
Mm.
that would be interesting and different, and not just feel like something tacked on that's not necessary.
Yeah.
Um, I think I've succeeded and failed to different degrees with expansions. Um, uh, Space Base is a good example of that, where I think the first expansion was not a good first expansion. I think it's a good expansion.
Mm.
I think
But
the
in terms of
content,
next step,
I think the content in it is fun. Um, I think the saga thing was good for a lot of people, but overall, probably a misstep for that
mm,
game. Um, there's a bunch of people who may even disagree with me on that, but I think there's probably more people who would say it didn't do anything for me, or I actually didn't get it because I didn't want to have to I didn't understand the campaign thing, right?
right.
So that was a misstep, but the content itself inside was really, I think, was good content. I really enjoyed that expansion mixed in, but I think it was a bad first expansion, right? So interestingly, now the third space-based expansion that was part of that Kickstarter, I think, is
Hmm.
actually the best first expansion. Um, and it's just like it's more content, it's more paths to victory without more rules, right? There's more card effects that you can find that don't
Right.
complicate the game that much. Um, but add a layer of variety and interest to the base game, right?
Yeah.
Um, Cubitos, similarly. So like part of my problem that I'm trying to get better at is knowing when to innovate. So like in Cubitos with the first draft of the expansion for that, I tried to do something innovative and different with it. I tried to make it add a new game system to it, and it just wasn't that good. Um, and then I quickly was like, you know what? I think this should be just a straightforward more stuff expansion because Cubitos is set up for that, right? Like it's very easy to just say, hey, here's more variety of possibilities the cards could do. Maybe here's one new die or two new dice that do different things, and that's it. I always wanted the game to play up to 6 players, so it also does that. It adds a fifth, sixth player. My original prototype played up to 6, and it plays great at 6. Right? There's no as long as you have the table big enough, it really nothing about the game gets in the way of playing up to 6. Um, and then like the Dead Reckoning expansions are, man, that's a really weird one because I think the expansions in that game are actually all really good.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't think the saga was a misstep. I think the saga is actually really cool in those expansions. Um, but I don't think we figured out how to market them.
Right.
So a lot of people saw the expansions for Dead Reckoning and were like, I don't know what that is. It looks expensive. And I do think they I wish they could have gotten a lower price on it, but
Yeah.
It is what it is. The card crafting stuff is expensive in the way it was set up, but um, it would have been nice if we could have gotten a little bit lower price. But anyway, people saw it. It's like it's an expensive expansion, and a lot of it is hidden content,
Right.
right? So they're like, so what? I get that there's stuff in the box, but I don't really know why I should want it yet,
Right.
right? And that's like, how do you market that, right? It's not a legacy game, but we've got hidden content that you can discover as you play.
Yeah, and you don't want to ruin
Um,
that surprise for people.
right, so we don't want to ruin it, but we also want to like show them that, hey, the stuff in here is cool, it's worth getting, right? So it's a weird thing to do. So that one I have mixed feelings on, because maybe the first expansion should have just been a variety. Hey, more like, so our fourth expansion for Dead Reckoning, which we'll have next year, on Kickstarter, is maybe should have been the first expansion, right? It's
Yeah.
like, here's unique ships and more island variety and more advancement variety, right? And it's just like, mix it in and go. It's just a lot more. It has an alternate set of ability cards for the decks, right?
Oh, cool.
That maybe should have been the first expansion, but I have no regrets about the other expansions.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
they're all actually really good,
Yeah.
right? It's just, how do you get new players to recognize that they're actually really cool
Yeah.
without being able to show them what's inside, right?
It's hey, we'll just take your word for it. I think
That's right.
everybody who's watching should go out and get every single expansion for Dead Reckoning and the base game if you don't have it.
Only if you play Dead Reckoning a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the key with a lot of expansions, right? Like a game should be sound and replayable in its base form without.
And Dead Reckoning is, like
Yeah.
I said, I think it's my best, if not one of my best designs, right?
Yeah.
And super replayable core game.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, start with one expansion if you haven't. I think the expansions are super cool. But
Yeah.
I think that answered your expansion question.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're a different. They're a little bit of a different design challenge. Yeah.
Well, we're running out of time on our.
I have one quick interjectory.
But Brian has a question.
Hopefully it'll tie into your question, but I think this one's really, really important. On BGG, your profile pic, your complete Great Western Trail regalia, how did that come about?
So that's me. I think I'm 19 or 20 there, and I am about 2 miles from the top of Mount Whitney, at the end of a 9-day backpacking trip. Yeah.
Nice.
I love the mountains. That's one of my other passions is camping, swimming in lakes, hiking mountains. My sister and I did the John Muir Trail a few years ago. I've got an itch to do it again, but now that I have kids, I can't really go away for a month and hike in the mountains. But
well, you bring them with you, and you say, "Listen,
that's the plan.
You're on your own."
That's the plan.
I know your children are a little younger, but you say, "Listen, the wilderness is what it is.
Go forth.
Go forth. If you emerge, great. You can come back to the Clair clan."
Yeah, no, my oldest son is getting old enough to kind of potentially do like a short backpacking trip. So we were talking about doing one in September, going out for 2 nights and hiking back out.
That'd be cool. And then one question that we always like to leave off on, other than yourself, who are some of your favorite designers and what are some of your favorite games out there that you enjoy playing?
The list is so long. I like, man.
It's a tough question. I know it is. Speaking as like a gamer, that's one of the toughest questions to throw.
Favorite designers. The list is long.
Yeah.
So I'll just name the one favorite designer who's probably was the most informative for me as a designer, which would be Richard Garfield, with specifically Magic the Gathering. Growing up was a game that informed a lot of my sort of ambitions for game design.
Cool.
But I also like his other games, right? Like King of Tokyo, I think is great. One of his less known games, Treasure Hunters, is awesome. Brilliant little drafting game.
Cool.
We've played a lot of Bunny Kingdom.
Bunny Kingdom's so good.
Favorite games, I think I mentioned Seven Wonders, Blood Rage, Eclipse, specifically the second edition because rockets are broken in the first edition.
Yeah.
Great Western Trail, you just mentioned that. Alexander Pfister, I guess I'm mentioning two designers now. Alexander Pfister's great. I don't think he's
Yeah.
missed any of his games have missed for me yet. Yeah, I mean, I could go on for a while. So
We can call it there. Thank you so much, John, for taking the time out of the schedule. This has been really fun, and look forward to seeing you at WSBG.
Indeed, looking forward to it.
And for everybody else, if you want to see John and hang out and try some of those prototypes and get him to spill his secrets, well, you too can come to WSBG and maybe play a game with him. We'll have more information on that in the next section in our little outro. But John, thank you again for your time. We'll talk to you later.
Indeed.
As always, what a great way to wrap up this series, at least until the event. Hey, Brian?
It's awesome. We went through so much stuff. It was just incredible. All the stuff and all the ways that he's had hits throughout his career so far, and how many projects he's got going in the bucket.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
I know he's rivaling our first one that was on Dice Tower. At least there's still a few more over on WSBG's YouTube channel if you want to check out interviews with Helga Ostertag of Gaia Project, Martin Wallace, Elizabeth Hargrave, Matthias Viga. We have all those over on the WSBG YouTube channel. But Rainer Knizia, Dr. Rainer Knizia, and his 2 dressers of 50 drawers each of games, John D. Clair is going to have a dresser like that pretty soon, it feels like.
Yeah. And look, if you are coming out to WSBG, you actually have a chance to fit into that process because he's bringing some prototypes.
That's true. You can play prototypes, and as always with all of our sort of guests at WSBG, with every ticket, you're going to get these little raffle tickets that you can put into a box of who you want to play a game with, and then they're going to draw out people, and you get to play games with that person. You get to play one of their favorite games that they've designed. We have, for all of our commentary team, you can do it. Tom Vassell, you can play some Cosmic Encounter. Z, you can play Jamaica. Camilla Cleghorn, you can play some Bad Company, and a whole bunch of else. Matthias Viga, you can play Arc Nova with the designer of Arc Nova. Space Base with the designer of Space Base. It's going to be a really fun time. It's been absolutely lovely doing this designer series on the Dice Tower, and we will hope to bring it back to you after the event. But for now, we've got to get prepped and ready for the event to make sure that for everyone who attends, it is the best friggin' board gaming week ever. That's our goal. So hopefully we'll see you there. Drop down in the comments if you are attending and what you're excited for and who you hope to win a raffle with. And you know what? We'll make it so that if you show your comment and you said, I want an extra raffle ticket to play a game with this person, and you show it to the people doling out the raffle tickets, they'll give you one. Well, that's just a special little thing for anybody who is coming to WSBG to play games with us. I can't wait for this event. I'm so thrilled. Again, if you haven't gotten your tickets, the window is closing. Your last chance to do so is September 9th, 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. That is when ticket sales stop entirely. You can still get yourself a ticket to any of the Outer Ring events, and any of the Ring events, the hotel package is likely finished, the reduced rate, but you can still get hotel tickets through our website as well, I believe. Anyway, that's it for us. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope you enjoyed this designer series. If you missed some, we have Dr. Rainer Knizia, Randy Flynn, an interview with Stronghold Games, the team behind Stronghold Games, Manny Tremblay of Dice Throne, Jacob Frixilius of Terraforming Mars fame. We've got an inside look at DeVere and the operations and what it takes on running a publishing company, and an inside look in that capacity. We have an interview with Paul Denon of Dune Imperium fame, also working for Direwolf Digital. And then now we have this one with John D. Clair. That's 8 that you can watch on the Dice Tower, and then 4 more over on WSBG's channel of, again, like I said, Helga Ostertag, Martin Wallace, Elizabeth Hargrave, and Matthias Viga. This was an awesome, fun series, Brian. I'm so glad that we got to do it. And let us know also in the comments who you want to see us interview moving forward, because ideally we'd like to make this sort of a regular thing over here on Dice Tower or also on WSBG. So yeah, it's been fun. Got anything else before we sign off, Brian?
No, but if you know Steffenfeld, have him give us a call.
Yeah, that's true. We have, Antoine Bauza is probably in the works for our next upcoming. We want to get everybody from obviously our games and the design space as well. So thanks everyone for tuning in. My name is Chris George.
And I'm Brian Muller.
And as we say at WSBG Vegas, get in the game.